Welcome to the WagerTalk Podcast for the week ending April 15th. We've got a big show tonight as we'll be joined by Dan Besbris from hoopball.com. He's a featured contributing editor there. He's good friends. He works with our buddy Aaron Brewski that's been on our show before. Ralph Michaels, Dave Cokin joins me in studio tonight. We're going to preview the biggest games in the NBA playoffs and some Major League Baseball for the weekend. And we will also have best bets at the end of the show. Last week, 3-0 on the best bets. Going to look to duplicate that this week. Mark Seidel is behind the controls, and I am your host, Marco D'Angelo. Let's get this party started. Guys, NBA playoffs, what a crazy last night for the NBA season. Going into Wednesday night, there were 44 different combinations that you could have had with playoff matchups. And that's what the NBA wanted to see, and that's what they got. Some blowouts, some tank jobs, and we've got the seedings. And let's take a look at one of the games. We'll do the Eastern Conference 2 games, and then we'll head to the West. Going to start with you, Ralph. Anytime we're going to have a game that has Cleveland, we're going to talk to you first. And the Cavaliers, they're here. They've got the 4 seed. They're minus 6.5 against the Pacers. I got to ask you, did they get the bat signal up in Cleveland? Have they switched the playoff switch, so to speak, as everybody's been waiting for, ready to go?
Well, you know, they didn't care about the last couple games. They cared about LeBron playing all 82, getting his 10 points. They pulled him right after that against the Knicks. So, you know, LeBron doesn't care what seed he is, where he is. It doesn't matter. You know, he knows he's gone through the finals the last 3 years. He's gone 36-5 in the Eastern Conference. The thing about the Cavs that's interesting is their preferred lineup is George Hill, Rodney Hood, Jeff Green, Kevin Love, and LeBron James. And that group of 5 has started exactly 0 games together. Sunday afternoon against the Pacers will be the first time all year we've seen that starting lineup walk out on the opening tip together.
Well, that's kind of odd that they already know that that's the 5, that's the preferred lineup, and they haven't even played together yet to know that that's what they like. Dave, looking at this Indiana Pacer team, throwing out the last game because it meant nothing for them. They sat players. The 9 games before that, they went 7-2 down the stretch. But what was even more impressive to me with that late season run is 6 of those 9 games were on the road. This is a team that's playing good basketball at the right time, and they've given the Cavs problems in the past. They've been a pesky foe.
No, and look, everybody can give the Cavs problems for a simple reason, which is number 29 in defense. I mean, you got to be able to stop somebody. And they weren't good defensively last year. I think they were 22nd. But, you know, you can live with that when you've got a good offense. When you're 29th in defense, I don't know if you can suddenly just turn on a switch come playoff time and ramp it up defensively. And that, to me, is a signal that you might see some points scored in this. Look, LeBron James is going to get his. Kevin Love is going to get his. Who's going to defend? Well, LeBron James will defend, but the rest of the defense just isn't very good. To me, even though the NBA playoffs, you think of it, and on the surface as well, you know, teams are going to play closer to the vest. There's going to be a lot more intensity. And that's true, but if you're not good at something, I don't know that you suddenly get good. I think you might get a lot of points right out of the gate in this one. And I'm kind of looking at the over in game 1.
Well, I can't disagree with you there. They haven't shown any defense all year. Ralph, looking at this number of minus 6.5, you know you're never going to get a bargain when you're playing, you know, if you're going to back the Cavs. They're a popular team, obviously, because of LeBron and the success that they've had. Where do you see this game as far as a betting standpoint?
Oh, I think you are getting a bargain on the Cavs. You know, you look at them as the favorites in the East, despite being a 4 seed, but the game is lined like a 4 or 5 seed at 6.5. So if the Cavs are going to play up to their potential, you know, the Pacers beat them 3 out of 4 this year, but the Cavs swept them last year, and you get LeBron in the playoffs, it's a different scenario. So in this instance, while the Cavs are lined as the best team in the East as far as the futures go, this 4 or 5 seed is not lined for the best team in the East to only be a 6.5 point favorite.
I'll throw out some key stats for you guys, and we'll wrap this one up. Cleveland this year, 13-27 against the spread at home. We know that they've not covered the spreads. And whenever you've gone to where today's spread is, 6.5. From 6.5 to a 12-point favorite at home this year, that number goes to 3-14 against the spread.
That's not good.
It's the playoff time. We're flipping that switch, and I'm here in studio flipping a switch that nobody can see. But
I can see it.
But I believe the Cavs started 3-21 ATS. They had covered 7 or 8 straight at home before those last couple games where they tanked. So they were a different team down the stretch.
And throw one for Indiana. They're 33-18 the last 3 years against the spread against division opponents. Me and you've kind of bucked all week, Ralph. I think I'm leaning slightly to the Indiana side here. I haven't really lined this one up officially yet for Sunday, but I want to see if there is any movement. I'm hoping that we get that public money come in game day, because we're doing this podcast on Thursday night. They just brought these lines out, less than 5 hours ago. We were waiting for Vegas to put the numbers up, and, it could go up.
I have a quick question for Ralph, because, look, like most people who like to bet on sports and have access to good information, I've been following your daily charts, which have been just sensational in the NBA. How much use are they in the play? Do you have to just throw them out going into the playoffs, or do we still derive some use for them?
I think we need to throw them out until after the first round. I'll keep doing them, just so they're there for the presence of having the information archived. But I think until we get into full playoff mode in the second series, that they aren't as useful as they were. One interesting thing I looked at the Cavs is, I look at LeBron, and he played all 82 games for the first time in his career this year. And I thought they would be a better team with rest. The Cavs are actually the worst team ATS-wise in the NBA with 2 or more days rest, going 6-14 ATS. Now, you talked about their bad home record. A lot of that is encompassed in there, but that's just a number that shocked me.
Good stuff, Ralph. Let's move over to another game, and I'll tell you what, I'm kind of excited to see this team play. I like what they did down the stretch, and that's talking about the Philadelphia 76ers. You can't talk – I can't remember a team this hot going into the playoffs, and they did it. They had pressure. They had that mammoth statement game. We talked about it on last week's podcast against the 76ers, and what a thriller that ended up being. But now they face Miami and forget that last game, the 35-point blowout. I was on Philly in that one, and it was because I really did think Milwaukee was going to tank that game. And they did. Absolutely. It was one of the easiest wins tickets I ever cashed. But you look at this team down the stretch. They have played such good basketball. My question to you is, after such a run, and because this team is a young team, and they did get that number 3 seed, and they wanted it bad, do you see any kind of letdown from this team with the inexperience?
And I'll use the game as an example. The game right after the Cleveland game was against
Dallas,
an absolutely horrible team that was trying to lose games. That was a massive letdown spot. Massive letdown spot for Philadelphia. They ended up not covering, but they walked off the last, 20 seconds of the game, and it has an unmolested layup that somebody didn't take, so they could have covered that spread as well. That tells you something about a team when they're in the flattest spot they were of the entire season for them was that game, and they still won by double digits. And I know it was against Dallas, but they were never threatened in the game. They still in fact, they came out in the first quarter. It's like, geez, they're going to beat the team by 30. And then they kind of relaxed after that and just got the job done. This team's got monster momentum right now. But what makes this series interesting is that Miami's a really competitive basketball team. I know, and Ralph can give you the numbers, but it's pretty clear on Miami. They played at the level of their competition. They do it all the time. They've been a very live dog this year, and they've been an awful favorite, especially when laying, we're talking laying substantial points. They just don't cover against teams, but they'll win those games. But they're tough to knock out. And at this point, guys, the market isn't going to get you any favors on the 76ers. It's not like they're sneaking up on the guys who hang the numbers at this point.
Yeah, and Ralph, and that's just where I was going to go with you on that, is the value has been sucked out of Philadelphia. Throw out that last game because Milwaukee tanked. Philadelphia, although they won 14 games in a row, they did not cover the spread in the last 3 games prior to the season finale against Milwaukee. And you look at this team in playing Miami. I'm going to give you a stat here, and this is a mind-boggling stat. Miami, this season, when they've been a road underdog in this price range, 6.5 to 12, 15-4 against the spread.
Which is what I was saying.
Exactly. I mean, this is a team that's scrappy. They split the 4 games during the regular season. Only one of the games was outside of this number of 6.5. What do you think, Ralph?
Well, it's Philly. You've got the youth and you've got the playoff inexperience, and that's what you're going to have to deal with. I think the first game they can get through that. I think they'll struggle a little bit with the adjustment in the second game. I think you have unbridled enthusiasm. All these young kids. Markelle Fultz is a great addition to be able to play after missing the entire season. The first 70 games, he came back, played a little bit, was the youngest player to get a triple-double. But, you talked about their stretch. They've won their last 14 games, 11-3 against the spread. Those 3 non-covers was the Cleveland win. They won by a basket. That's all that mattered, laying 3. That says something that you're laying 3 to the Cavs in a playoff-type scenario. The Dallas game that you win by 12, that's fine. And the Atlanta game right after Dallas where they won by 8, not covering by a point. So all those non-covers are completely understandable. My thing is this. Remember, you got the Embiid-Whiteside Twitter battle that was going on, too. That's going to carry over. These teams don't like each other very much. So, I do like Miami to keep this series close. It's not going to be a sweep in any means, but I think that the young enthusiasm from the 76ers carries them through the first game.
Yeah, I'm going to go in and chime. This one we're going to agree on, Ralph, and I like Philly in the first game, and it's just for that reason. I think the atmosphere is just going to be rocking in Philadelphia. I mean, let's not forget, this is a city that just won the Super Bowl. They've got a young basketball team that's going into the playoffs red hot. The city, and they just had the college basketball championship. My hometown, Pittsburgh, used to be the city of champions back in the 70s when we had the Steelers and the Pirates doing stuff.
And Gabe Kapler's got the Phillies playing. Okay,
no, that's not going to happen.
I won't get carried away.
Gabe Kaplan, are we talking? Marco, I know you were at the Golden Knights game last night. We could almost equate the 76ers to the Golden Knights. It's a rebirth in Philly for this basketball team that hasn't been around.
They're fun to watch, too. They really are. I mean, they're an entertaining team.
Absolutely. I mean, they've got some offensive firepower, young guys that are just learning how to play the game. I mean, think about if this team stays intact for a couple years, what they're going to be like. They're going to be the Eastern Conference favorites next year. I don't think there's any. Let me with Boston getting a healthy Hayward and Irving back, it'll be Boston and Philly because LeBron's not going to be in Cleveland. So Boston and Philly are going to be the first 2 teams on the odds chart next year.
And let's not forget, Joel Embiid missed, I think, the last 10 or 12 games of the season. He'll be back. He should be back for game 1. If not, he'll be back shortly thereafter.
All right, we got an overplay on this one, and we've got. Or no, what were you on, Dave, on this one? Do you have an opinion on this one?
I wasn't.
You wasn't. Okay, you had the over in the first.
That's where I'm going to stay.
Okay.
If I had to play it, I would take Miami plus the points, but I'm not going to do it.
All right, so we got a maybe on Miami and 2 Philadelphia's. Let's head to the Western Conference, and we've got some good games. Let's start with San Antonio and Golden State. If this was a healthy Golden State team, be no problem. But we've got the Spurs. We've got Pop. He's, still one of the greatest coaches of all time. I still think he's the best in the NBA right now, but we'll be talking about somebody later in the show that I think is the up-and-coming guy in the NBA. But does the Spurs have a shot in this game 1? They have played so poorly, Dave, on the road. This is a team, the last 13 games on the road, they're just 1-12 straight up. How do they find a way to stay with the Warriors?
I don't know. Well, they stay with the Warriors if the Warriors continue to play thoroughly uninspired basketball, I guess. I guess that's what it comes down to. They're just not, they're so beat up. They've had so many injury issues that I think that's got to play into any analysis that you have in the Warriors at this point. But the Spurs, I think they're basically unplayable on the road at this point, aren't they? I mean, they can't play a lick on the road. And everybody knows it. So, to me, I know they're going to get pounded with Golden State money because the thought process is going to be, well, here's where the Warriors turn it on.
Yeah.
They might be right. I can't go against that line of thinking. I do think the Warriors are going to come out with more intensity here, and even an unhealthy Warriors team, minus Curry, is still probably too much for San Antonio on the road.
I think Golden State would prefer to play San Antonio trading Curry for Kawhi Leonard. Golden State is a much better team without Curry than San Antonio is without Kawhi.
Yeah, no question about it. In talking about the intensity level, clearly, once Golden State saw they weren't going to catch the Rockets for the number 1 seed and Curry got hurt, you saw the difference. Where I saw the biggest difference with this team was on the defensive side of the basketball. This team did not have that intensity to play any defense. And where I'm going to go for this first one, because it's been so ugly for San Antonio on the road, and it's not like they didn't have something to play for. San Antonio
they almost missed the playoffs.
Yeah, they one game, they could have been out of the playoffs. So they had everything to play for, and they just couldn't get it done on the road. But I think you are going to see that defensive intensity come back, and the only chance the Spurs have in this series is to try to get it into a half-court game. They don't have enough offensive firepower to try to run with the Warriors without Leonard. So I'm going to look to the under in game 1 here. I think you're going to see solid effort, and Pop's going to try to slow it down. I'm going to go with the under, and I think we're getting a nice number because people are looking at the Warriors. Nobody likes to bet an under with the Warriors, and you look at those last few games and the points that they gave up. This is not a big over-under. You're looking at a total of 210 in a Warriors game.
A couple technical angles that I looked at. And, you always look at away dogs and home favorites. But when you get to the playoffs, I look at them at a certain price level because all the playoff games are going to be within a few points, as the series progresses. And we talked about the Spurs. I think, they lost that last game at home, but they failed to cover by a point or two. So I think the home team is now 16-1 as far as the Spurs go. So the Spurs are 8-1 at home, 0-8 on the road. But, I look at the Spurs when they're an away dog of 5 or more. They went 0-9 straight up and 3-6 ATS this year. Then on the flip side, though, Golden State is rarely a single-digit home favorite. They're normally laying double digits against, their conference and their division and those teams that make those tough road trips. This year, again, we know Curry was injured, but as a single-digit home favorite, Golden State was 5-8 straight up this year and 3-10 against the spread. So, Livingston changed them and made them a better team those last few games. But when Livingston and Curry were both out, they were a very mediocre team.
Throw one stat in here, and you said that they're generally a big favorite, in these games. In the first round of the playoffs, the last 32 first-round playoff games for the Golden State Warriors, they're 24-8 against the spread. So they're obviously winning, and they're winning by a margin because they've been laying some points. So they take care of business once the playoffs start. This one, I think, is going to be the most interesting series of the first round, guys. And this is the Utah Jazz and Oklahoma City. And you talk about, Ralph, that final night with all of the jockeying of positions going on that night, next to, obviously, the Denver Nuggets missing the playoffs. I think the biggest loser from the season finale night was the Utah Jazz, because this is a team that went from the number 3 seed in home court first round to slipping to the number 5 spot when they lost to Portland in that 3-4 matchup, and Oklahoma City won their game, and all of a sudden they don't have home court advantage and they got to go to play Oklahoma City. Do you see any carryover with them, missing a golden opportunity?
It probably saved me money because I would have been on a Utah future had they had the 3 seed. I thought they had a chance to, if Houston got upset, they could have beaten Golden State. I want no part of them now. But, the stat that I saw when I pulled up the Utah numbers, as an away dog this year, Utah is minus 5.1 points per game. They're allowing 106.1 points per game. As a home favorite, they allow 95.3 points per game, 13 points per game better at home. Their defense is elite at home, so them not having the home edge is a huge deal.
Wait, my advice in this series, sit back and relax, watch the first 2 games if you want on TV, just kind of have a drink or 2, and then wait for game 3 when they get back to Utah, because that's when the Jazz, look, they might show up the first 2 games, But I don't care what they do in the first 2 games. When they get back to Salt Lake City, watch out. That's where this team will really step on it. Plus, the longer the series goes, the more their physical superiority. I'm not talking about talent, not physical talent, but just wear and tear physicality, if you will. The longer the series goes, the more it's likely to show up. And when you get into the altitude and the comfort zone that they enjoy in Salt Lake City, I think that's where it plays out. So I'm going to do nothing in the first 2 games this series, but you can pretty much put a circle around Utah in Game 3 for me.
Yeah, you look at this series, Dave, and you talk about when you put the X's and O's up. I mean, you've got an offensive team in Oklahoma City that, all they want to do is score, and you've got the best defensive team, in the NBA, and this is a team, you gave the numbers for the season, Ralph. How about this? Down the stretch, last 18 games of the season, the Utah Jazz held their opponents to under 100 points in 14 of those 18 games. And in today's NBA, you don't see that anymore. And we know that when it gets to playoff time, teams ratchet up even more defensively. I don't know how much more this team can ratchet up defensively. I know this much. If you do get by Utah in this series, it's going to take something out of you moving forward.
That's kind of what I talked about with the Golden Knights and the Kings, and that I think the Golden Knights, if they win this series, speaking of the NHL, they might, if it's a long series, they might feel the wear and tear in their next series because the Kings are such a physical team. I think this is the NBA version of that. Utah has good talent, but where they win games is with Gortat and the rest of those guys playing really nasty physical ball. The only thing missing from them, I mean, they could be like the old bad guys in wrestling when they wore those masks. If they did that, then they'd be a perfect fit. I think Utah's got a great chance to win the series. But to me, the strategy is what I said before. You want to win bets, wait until Game 3, and then get on the Jazz. I think that's going to get you a win.
Are you comparing them to the Mahorn and Rodman Pistons?
Oh, McFilthy and McNasty. That's not that's Johnny Most, the late, great Celtics. McFilthy and McNasty. That's what he called those guys.
Marco, I agree with Dave as far as I'm going to sit pat this first game. We're looking at a total of 205. If the first game or first couple games go over the total, I expect this total in Utah to be 193, a huge 12-point difference. But if we see a couple high-scoring games and we don't get that adjustment, not only will I look to play Utah Game 3, but the under as well.
Okay. Throw you a little stat on Oklahoma City, and we talk about them. They don't play defense, and if you don't play defense and you're laying points at home, you're generally not going to cover spreads that often. Against division opponents this season, this is home and away, they are just 2-14 against the spread this season.
Well, they were just phenomenal money burners early in the season in every category, and that's one that apparently held up all season.
I'm going to probably sit back and watch Game 1 because I'm just a little concerned of what the Portland game took out of them on Wednesday. But I'll tell you what, if they lose Game 1, I think I'll be jumping in on Game 2 for the Jazz to even a series. I think they go back to Utah 1-1. I just don't know if they win Game 1 or Game 2, but I see them splitting this in Oklahoma City, so that's where I'll be. All right, guys, we're going to take a quick break. When we return, we're going to shift gears and head to a little baseball action for the weekend. We got 3 games we're going to preview over the weekend for you, and we're not done with NBA action. Stick around because later in the show, we are going to be talking about the series, see if there's any values there, and we'll be talking with Dan Besbris about the series and moving forward, and if he sees any sleepers sneaking into either the Eastern or Western Conference Finals. We'll be back with more here at WagerTalk.com.
It's Manic Monday, and that means every pick at WagerTalk.com is just $9. Get a play in any sport valued at up to $30 for just $9 each and every Monday at WagerTalk.com.
Welcome back to the WagerTalk Podcast. It's segment 2, baseball time, guys. Weekend action. I know playoffs start and baseball's probably going to take that little back seat, but
not
I
in my
know,
house.
Yeah, not in mine either. We've been Dave, you're off to a great start in baseball. I'm off to a great start, and we've got some games this weekend. Excited about it. I know it's only April, Dave, but I'm going to talk about this first one on Friday night. This is kind of a big series already. Arizona going to L.A. Dodgers got swept, second series of the season in Arizona, and it just catapulted Arizona on this start. They're, 9-3 or 9-4?
They're playing really good ball. And Goldschmidt he's not hitting. Their best guy's not hitting. That's a scary thought.
So you're looking at a Dodger team. It's only mid-April, but they're already 5 back in the win column. You got a big. You don't want to start losing more ground to this team.
No, but the Dodgers are probably looking at this saying, "Look, our pitching's fine, and it is. Their team ERA, I believe, is under 3. They're just not hitting, and they clearly missed Justin Turner. Well, he's going to be back in a couple more weeks. So I don't think the Dodgers are particularly worried. They're just kind of flat coming out of spring training, and the Diamondbacks have been very, very good so far. Nevertheless, anybody who doesn't think the Diamondbacks are a threat to win the NL West at this point is a little delusional. This is a good baseball team. They really respond to Torey Lovullo, who's a heck of a leader. I think the players like playing for him, and they're legitimately good.
This is a team, Dave, we talk about you have to pay your dues. They made that first step last year, getting to the playoffs. Now I think they are going to advance. I think they're going to be in this race with them and the Dodgers all the way through. Colorado, they showed signs last year, but they haven't shown that so far this year.
Rockies were one of the teams I bet under this year. I felt they'd regress, and I feel pretty good about that prediction right now. The Rockies got a lot of mileage out of some really ordinary relievers last year. Now, I know they picked up Wade Davis, which certainly helps, but you got to get to Wade Davis, and I just don't like their bullpen, and I think there's going to be a big regression in that area. Plus, a couple of their position guys I thought maybe had too good of seasons last year and might go backwards this year. It's early, but I kind of like my call on the Rockies.
Ralph, you look at Zach Greinke's on the mound for Arizona, and he had a great first start, which put to rest. We talked about it last week. There was all those spring training rumblings that he had lost a little bit on his velocity, and he had the hamstring issue. And you brought up a good point last week that, we'll see how he fares in St. Louis because the weather was going to be bad. Mm-hmm. That happened to be my 5% play on Saturday. I was on St. Louis. They got to Greinke, got 5 runs off him, so he didn't look good. Now you've got one good start, you got one bad start. Are you writing that one off to the weather and think that now that he's back in, the West Coast that he should be more like that first start?
Well, he struggled against the Dodgers. He's 1-2 with a 7.56 ERA. And so I think this is an important game for Arizona. The Diamondbacks have taken 9 of 12 from the Dodgers. So, they've handled them. They've beaten Medea 3 times since August 8th last year. They beat them 6-3, 8-1, and 3-1. So they feel very comfortable going there. How about Medea? You pitch 5 innings, 5 shutout innings, you get a 10-1 ratio, you get a 10-1 strikeout to walk ratio, and you get sent to the bullpen. So this is only the second start that shows you how the Dodgers. So when you've got a guy who isn't a full-time starter going against Greinke, I think there's more importance for Arizona to take this game. It's a big game for them.
Let me go back to let me talk first on Maeda, who's he's a versatile pitcher for the Dodgers because he actually can start or relieve and doesn't seem to have a particularly big ego about either one. So he's a good piece for them. Talk about Greinke's start in St. Louis. And this was a bizarre start because Greinke, when he gets ahead of hitters, is usually really effective. And if you go to that St. Louis game, he got ahead of just about everybody. I mean, it's 0-2. It's 0-2. I think Martinez hit the 3-run homer on an 0-2 pitch. He just wasn't putting guys away, and just his command was a little bit off. And it doesn't matter who you are. If you miss in the strike zone, you're going to get hit. Okay, and that's what happened to him. That's what happened to him in that game. I don't think it was a bad matchup. He just made some bad pitches at the wrong time. I think he's fine. This looks like a good duel. And, let's face it, the Dodgers' offense isn't scaring anybody right now. Maeda has looked sharp so far in his limited body of work. I think this could be one of those games where runs is tough to come by, and it could be one of those 3-2 battles.
You're a more purist, Dave. I want to ask you about this with Medea. Do you Maeda? What about going back and forth? He's handled it so far, but do you like that, using a guy that way?
If the guy doesn't mind it, then I don't mind it. I mean, that's what it comes down to. Is some pitchers can't handle that, It's just like some guys can't handle. Some guys are really good at playing a variety of positions, being super utility guys, and other guys they're just not good at it. They can't prep properly. So Maeda doesn't seem to have a problem with it. So therefore, neither do I. It makes him a versatile piece.
With that said, would you be more inclined, if you like this pitching matchup, to take him first 5 innings? Because you're going to most likely not see him longer than that. He's probably, because going from the bullpen back to starting again, you're not going to get a guy. He's not going to go into the 7th inning.
No, I wouldn't think so, unless his pitch count is really good. And the Diamondbacks generally don't make that an easy thing to do. I hadn't thought about that, because the thing I was looking at most of all was, this is a good shot to get 5 to 7 good innings out of the starting pitchers. And I really don't have much concern about the bullpens. I know Jensen got off to the rough start, but KJ looks to be okay now. He's settling in. There's probably a little dead arm coming out of spring training. That happens all the time. It's just neither team is banging the ball. The whole Dodgers setup will change when Turner comes off the DL, by the way. So that's a big, big deal for L.A.
One number that jumped out for me with the Diamondbacks' quick start is they're 6-0 against left-handed pitchers, and they're number 5 in Major League Baseball slugging against lefties, .471. They're very mediocre, 3-3 against right-handed pitchers. They're number 22 in slugging, .351. So they've taken advantage of the early lefties. We'll see if that continues or not.
Hey, if you look at that lineup, you can see why they damage lefties. I mean, they've got some guys who can just crush southpaws.
I think this is a statement series for the Dodgers to let Arizona know that we're still here. We're not going anywhere. And this will be, probably the best price you're going to see on the Dodgers in this series for the weekend. So I got a weak vote for the Dodgers for me. You guys have anything official you'd like to go either side here?
No, I don't. And just bear in mind that I'm one who generally, I might do one or two plays late at night for the following day, but generally I'll wait for the morning. One of the reasons for that is if you're not handicapping bullpens, or if you're not factoring bullpens into your handicapping, I just don't see how you can beat this stuff.
Marco certainly and lean to the under for me.
Okay, good stuff on that one. Let's go to Saturday. We got Philadelphia and Tampa. Not two marquee teams, but we got a couple pitchers here. We got some name pitchers. Jake Arrieta made his debut for Philadelphia over the weekend, and it was an auspicious debut for him. Didn't go very far. Had a rough first inning, settled down then. I think he retired 10 of the next 11 that he faced, but they took him out because he was on a pitch count. What do you see moving forward, Dave, with Arrieta, and which Arrieta are we going to see? Because last year we saw two different Arrietas.
Right. I think we might see the same thing here, where Arrieta gets stronger as the season continues, and I can see that happening. He looks like he might just be more comfortable in warm weather at this point. So that's it's kind of a tough read on him at this point. But where I think Arrieta's big value is going to be in the Phillies is with the other young pitchers on that staff. I think Arrieta is going to be a really good guiding influence. And the pitcher I really expect to step forward this year is Nick Pivetta, who I think, under the guidance, if you will, of Arrieta, has the stuff to become a much better pitcher than we've seen in his early career.
Good stuff on that. Ralph, Chris Archer got off to a slow start this year. He's got an ERA of 5.94, a high whip of 1.50.
He needs to get out of there.
Yeah, but his last start showed some signs. He went 5 2/3, allowed 3 runs, had 8 strikeouts in that game, back-to-back outings with 8 strikeouts. So the guy still has some stuff to fool the hitters. Do you take that as a buy sign? Maybe he's rounding into form? Because Archer's a guy that when he's on, he is a really good pitcher, but he's been very inconsistent. Obviously this year and a good part of last year.
Well, like Dave said, he has to get out of there. I mean, at home, at Tampa, he has a 3.21 lifetime ERA, but he's 22-31. And, I mean, other pitchers would have a lot worse record than that. He's pitched that well to have a 3.21. So, I'm not worried about him. He's been there. He's done that. I look at this game, and Philly comes in as the hot team, 5-1, winning 5 of their last 6. And Tampa Bay comes in 3-9 their last 12. But you look at the situation, and this comes just down to situational handicapping. Philadelphia's last 6 games came against 2 last-place teams. Cincinnati and Miami are combined 5-18. Tampa,
here's another last place team.
well, but you look at Tampa Bay. I mean, Tampa Bay had those 3 games at home against the Red Sox, as good as anyone. Then they play 9 straight road games against the Red Sox, against the White Sox, and against the Yankees. So if you've played the Red Sox 7 games and you've played the Yankees twice on the road, a lot of teams are going to be 1-8 in that stretch. So, I just look at the situation, who they've played. Tampa Bay's played the toughest schedule so far year to date. Philadelphia is coming off the easiest schedule the last 7 days.
Archer is, and I made when I kind of jumped in and said he's got to get out of there. This is a talented guy who needs to be off that team because at this point, I don't look. We saw it. Here's a good illustration. Justin Verlander was kind of looking like, oh boy, he's had a great career, but he's on the decline now. And why was he on the decline? Because his team stunk. And I'm sorry, he might have been giving it his best effort. I'm sure he was, but when you've been someplace a long time and the window is closed in that location, you're just not that sharp. And all of a sudden, he gets dealt to Houston. He finally accepts the deal after turning it down. And the last minute, he accepts the deal. Oh, look what happened. Justin Verlander's back to being Justin Verlander again. I'm not putting Archer quite at that level, but this guy's really good. Unfortunately, he's in an extremely discouraging situation right now. Tampa has no chance to compete. They just don't have it. What's the best they're going to be? 75 and 87, something in that range. That's the ceiling for that team. They have no chance to compete. And this guy is he's not going to be there for the long haul. He knows it. Everybody else knows it. The sooner they can move him for Chris Archer's sake, the better. I will not be playing an Archer right now. He looks like a discouraged guy on the mound. You see him stomping around at times out there. I don't think he's happy. And to me, he's a fade at this point, and that's got nothing to do with his talent, but it's got a lot to do with his situation and the fact that their bullpen is atrocious.
Well, when you're a pitcher and you've got a team that can't score any runs. This is a team in 12 games so far this year, Dave. 7 of the 12 games, they've scored 3 runs or less. 6 of the 7 games, it was 2 runs or less. They just can't score runs. And as a pitcher, you got to go out there and think, I got to throw a shutout to win a game.
Yep. And I don't mean to be. I would say no offense to the Rays fans, but how many of them are there anyway? When I was doing my preseason breakdowns, and I do a WAR breakdown, and they're not my stats. I used wins against replacement fan graphs. It's as good as any. Kevin Kiermaier is their best player. And this isn't an insult to Kevin Kiermaier, who's a really fine player. But if he's your best guy, you're in trouble. Yeah. Okay? I mean, he's not a superstar. He's a tremendous defensive player. Okay, offensively, but he can't be your best player. They're an expansion team. They're almost an expansion team at this point. They're not. The only thing that's saving them from being the butt of all the jokes is the fact that Miami's in the same state as they are, and the Marlins are even worse, possibly a lot worse. But it's a really discouraging situation for any veteran, a real quality veteran, who I can't think really wants to be there.
Any play on this one, Ralph?
I'm going to point out again another team that's been started off well against the lefties. Philly's 3-0 against lefties, 3-5 against righties. So, Dave can fill us in if that's because of their lineup or just situationally. But, I know you guys are anti-Archer. If the price is right and he's laying, $130 because of the situations of them coming off the loss and Philly having won 5 of 6, I would take a look at him.
I don't even think he'll be that.
No, okay.
No, not without Arrieta. Arrieta's, still got a decent reputation, right. And the Phillies are playing better baseball, and the Rays are horrendous. That to me would be the ceiling as far as what his number is. I think it's more like 118, something like that.
Okay.
To add to the right-handers going back to the start of last season versus right-handers, they are 45 and 80. Philadelphia against righties. So I got a weak vote for Tampa in this one, hoping that they find a way to score a couple runs for Chris Archer.
And by the way, I'll throw this in. Would that be a first 5 or a full game?
Because Tampa Bay's a team is they're a first 5 inning team.
I agree. I think if you're going to play Tampa right now in any way, you're going to play Tampa, road dog, home favorite, whatever. I think you got to go. They're a team that goes into the first 5 range, although the Phillies bullpen is also dicey.
I was going to say, Dave, if you follow Dave on Twitter, you knew he had Philadelphia last night, blowing a ninth. I was with you last night.
The weird thing is this: Neris, excuse me, he had 21 straight saves converted. But is there anybody you're less comfortable with? And by the way, it's 21 out of 22 now.
Yeah, good stuff.
But they won the game in extra innings, so I'm happy.
Another point about first 5-inning teams, we talked about it. I told you, I think it was on our radio show the one week. If you're going to play the Pirates, they are a first 5-inning team. And who has the worst bullpen in baseball right now? Pittsburgh Pirates.
Well, but Felipe Rivero is now Felipe Vasquez. By the way, for those who are wondering, who's this Vasquez guy? Yeah. It's Felipe Rivero. He's changed his name.
Marco, let me jump in as well. We're talking first 5 innings. The first pitch started again. If you go to WagerTalk.com, you go to MLB, you go to News. If you look at the pitchers' logs for the last 15 games and the teams for the last 20, you'll see both first-inning scores and fifth-inning scores for those interested in playing first and fifth innings, so you can follow on how your players and teams do, something you can't find anywhere else.
Good stuff, Ralph, as always. All right, let's go to the Sunday marquee matchup. Guys were giving me a lot of grief about me picking this one.
I like
Ralph was.
I like I mean, I like watching this pitcher, and I love Petco Park, so I'm never going to knock this.
We've got San Francisco and San Diego. It'll be one of the more competitively priced games of the weekend. You got Tyler Beatty going for San Francisco and Joey Lucchesi, and I'm going to go to you first, Dave. I know you've been all over this guy. This guy's got a combination curveball changeup that is just nasty.
Yep. Curve.
And he's got a very complex delivery, but he's able to repeat the delivery. It's very deceptive. But his release point seems to be the same on every pitch. And I tell you what, he's got great command. He's a guy who doesn't have awesome stuff, but if you factor in, and this is why command is the most important thing out there. If you can put the ball where you want it, you're going to be a good pitcher. And so Lucchesi's one of those guys who had a modest ceiling, but it looks like he's going to be better than that.
When you see a guy, a young pitcher up this early, they like what they're seeing because, to be up this early. Now, the flip side, go to you, Ralph. San Francisco has Beatty. Here's a guy that at a time was a big prospect for the Giants, just never lived up to it. So you say, all right, well, hey, they must like him because they got him up early in the season. They got him up early in the season because they got all these injuries. They really didn't have a choice. His first outing, it was mixed reviews. He had some command problems in the game. How do you see the young pitcher moving forward who maybe wasn't ready for prime time, got the call a little early?
You're right. Beatty was a huge prospect, and he was a double number one. He got drafted number one out of high school from Toronto, 2011, went to Vanderbilt, was a number one draft pick again for San Fran. Only he made it to AAA last year, was 6-7 with a 4.39 ERA. The difference between these two teams is Beatty wouldn't be here if not for Baumgartner, Samardzija, and Cueto's injuries. On the flip side, you had Lucchesi, who wasn't drafted out of high school. He was only a fourth-round draft choice a couple years ago. 2 years in the minors. He only got to Double-A last year, but he was 5-3 with a 1.79, and he really proved, they do call it the churr of his pitch. And, after his first game, Dave talked about his release point, and he's really a strikeout pitcher. Struggled a little bit. Only had one strikeout, no walks in the first game.
But said after the game, it said it was called surreal.
Correct. He was very nervous, right? Going from Double-A last year, never even pitched in Triple-A, to making his first start. His last two starts, both against Colorado, he's had a 7-3 and 8-1, so a combined 15-4 strikeout walk ratio, really finding a spot.
And by the way, first-time starters at Coors, generally a pretty good fade. He undid that. And by the way, Lucchesi was on the mound for my 5% play, plus 145 on Tuesday. Thank you very much.
For $2, by the way. You were the $2 Tuesday, and,
I like
it takes a set of, we'll give you credit. A lot of guys, in this industry would just fire out a big favorite and, pad the stats. That's not how you beat baseball.
I give out what I'm playing myself.
Exactly.
Okay? And I'm not playing a lot of minus 190s, let me tell you. I want to talk about the Padres for a moment, and this isn't specific to this game, but I don't know if they've got the position players to develop. I think they're still going to have to make some deals for some position player prospects. But their pitching is holy crap material. They have got so many good pitching. They have nobody. There's nobody in baseball that has more good pitching prospects than San Diego. And this kid wasn't one of the best prospects coming into the season. They've got Anderson Espinosa, who they got from the Boston, who people have compared to some really great pitchers. He's probably not even going to be a starting pitcher when he gets up to San Diego. They're probably going to make him a bullpen guy. They've got like 8 really good quality starters, including Mackenzie Gore, who looks like he's going to be a stud down the road. It's a few years away, but I'm telling you, in that ballpark, which is still a pitcher's park, and with the stuff they've got coming up, the Padres by about 2020 or 21, look out. You might not score against this team.
I'm going to make you a GM for a day here. With all of those prospects, and I know pitching is so huge. If you're rich with talent on the pitching, do you get rid of any of them for...
And I'll tell you why. Because let's just say they've got, if you include Luke Casey, let's say they've got 8 high-end pitching prospects. 4 of them will probably get hurt. I'm sorry, it's just the way it is. They'll end up with a Tommy John someplace, and they'll be out for a year. And you never know. The best prospects still only pan out maybe 50% of the time. So, no, I'm going to ride all 8 guys and hope that 4 of them really develop into something special, and then you'll have a great team.
Yep. Look at the Mets with all, when they came up with all those young guys. If they all stayed healthy.
Listen, you want to go back to the old Mets when they had, was it Pulsifer? I'm going to blank out on the names now, but they had.
You're not going back to '69, are you?
No. This was like in the '90s. They had 3 absolutely dynamite young prospects. I mean, phenomenal stuff, and they all flamed out with injuries. So you don't know.
All right, you can never have too many pitchers.
One thing about San Diego is, and you got to look at a 5-6 record, but again, 6 games against the Dodgers, 3 against Arizona, 2 against Seattle makes it even more impressive. The one thing I will mention is San Diego's not a home favorite very often. They probably will be here on Sunday. They are 16-9 their last 25 games as a home favorite, so they do take care of business when they're in the better team role.
And Will Myers due back soon, which will help their offense.
And you know what? First time, I have always a big proponent, when you're facing a pitcher like this, especially with an awkward delivery and stuff, until you get to figure him out, I'm going to ride the pitcher first time around the league, so I'll be on San Diego on Sunday. All right, good stuff, guys. Let's head for a quick break. When we come back, we're going to dive deeper into the NBA playoffs. We'll have a special guest that will break down the playoffs for us. That's up next here at Wager Talk.
Every Tuesday, WagerTalk.com offers a best bet selection from its hottest handicapper. It's a great way to introduce yourself to WagerTalk.com with a big best bet winner for just $2 on $2 Tuesday.
Welcome back to Wager Talk Podcast. This is the NBA Deep Dive, and I am excited to bring on our next guest. This is a guy I go way back when with, and I won't say where that was at because I just erased that out of my memory banks. But we've kind of turned the roles around for this one. Last time me and you did something together, you were on the host side of the mic, and you were interviewing me. Now we've flipped it around, Mr. Big Time, and we're talking to Dan Besbris from Hoopball. You are Hoopball.com. You're the assistant GM there. And if people recognize that Hoopball.com reference, well, yes, because you work with our good buddy Aaron Bruski, and we've had him on the show several times, and we're getting Aaron Bruski Jr. tonight, the baby-faced assassin that I gave you that nickname way back when, Dan. Welcome to the show.
Can you believe, Marco, that was like a decade ago now?
It's it's 10 years that I've been in Vegas, and you were the first podcast that I was on, going way back when. And to tell some people, you've been on the mic for a good bit. You were doing some minor league baseball. I know Dave would be interested in that.
Oh, yeah.
He was the trivia question last announcer for a minor league baseball team that is no longer in existence. He was the last play-by-play guy. Can you name it, Dave?
Can I get a hint? I mean, there's a lot of teams.
California.
High Desert.
Begins with a B.
Bakersfield. Really?
Yeah,
really,
that's the one.
You
were basically there with High Desert because both of those teams contracted at the same time. It's true. I am the last broadcaster ever for the Bakersfield Blaze.
You realize that ballpark is actually older than I am, and boy, there's not many of those around.
That ballpark was built. One of the trivia questions we like to throw out about it was that it was completed like 6 months before Mount Rushmore.
How could that pass safety standards older than you?
Literally, so that's the 1930s, is that right?
1941.
1941, okay. I by the way, I've seen a game there.
You have?
Yes, I have.
That's outstanding. So you experienced the weirdness that was Sam Lynn Ballpark.
The worst infield.
I maintain is definitely still haunted. I don't know how the Twitter account still keeps running. Somebody must be doing it. I couldn't imagine who. When did you go?
It was several years ago. It was one of those deals where it had a weekend down in San Diego, and it was coming back, and it just happened. It was there's a ball game. Let's stop, and I had somebody with us. Let's go to the ball game. We wanted to get some food anyway, so we'll take a ball game for a couple hours. And I kid you not, I actually saw this. I saw a ball. I've never seen this in a professional ballpark before. Somebody had a ground ball, and the ball literally hit some kind of a stone in the infield and went completely in the opposite direction of where it was going. And it's like, this place is this is not a well-manicured infield.
Oh, no. Things took a very sour turn there for a long time. We did a pretty good job of turning it around while it lasted, but you're lucky that you just happened to catch a game where the ball kind of redirected into the outfield. There was a player who took one of those hops off the net in, I think it was 2010, and they ended up having to take him off the field on a stretcher.
Seriously?
The kid almost died.
Wow. That's scary.
You two guys could sit and talk minor league baseball for hours.
You know what? No, in all seriousness, it's a shame because Bakersfield's a pretty good-sized community. And we know about, pro ball in Southern California is a big deal. How do you not build it? I mean, look, even if you got to sell some extra pomegranates, get the funding for a new stadium. You can't let Bakersfield not have a team.
I worked pretty closely. There are a couple of kind of energy and agriculture guys that bought the team for a couple of years, and they were really close to securing funding for a new stadium, which would have basically saved baseball there. The expression, I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, so I'm not going to say any names, but he referred to a lot of the other wealthy people in town as all hat and no cattle. I'd never heard that expression before, but it was sort of as if to say they kind of promised him that they'd be behind him if he bought the team, and they'd help him with the fundraising, and then when push came to shove, nobody helped him, and the poor guy was kind of left hanging out to dry, frankly, and at that point it was sort of the true beginning of the end. But it was a magically awful place that I feel like if people didn't get a chance to see it, they missed out on one of the strangest sports experiences that they could ever have. If for no other reason, then it's one of the only ballparks in the world that faces directly into the setting sun.
I know, and the other one, which also was the subject of a lot of controversy, and we're getting off topic. This is good stuff. Jim Boughton actually wrote a book on this. Is Wacona Park in Pittsfield, Massachusetts,
That's right.
where I also saw games because I'm from that area, and they literally would have to hold the game up at times, the start of the game, because you couldn't see. You couldn't see. It was directly in the sun.
Can I tell you guys one more funny story before we talk basketball?
Go ahead.
So, and this is a slight indictment of the good people of Bakersfield, so I hope they're not going to be upset with me for telling this tale. But they did have the very wise idea in, I think it was the late 80s, to build a giant sun shield in center field. So that way, as the sun was going down, it would duck behind what was effectively like sort of Green Monster-ish, but built beyond the center field wall. But for whatever reason, when they were taking the measurements on it, they measured in the off-season when the Earth's axis is different than during the season. So they built the wall in the wrong place. And the sun actually kind of swings around the sunscreen so that you could only start the games, maybe 10 to 15 minutes earlier than expected instead of 20 to 30.
Oh, boy.
So a lot of money down the drain, a big oopsies, and a lot of games in late June and early July that start at about 8:00 p.m. Those games go late, man.
Well, I hope we're getting a new 51s stadium here.
It's going to be gorgeous, too.
Yeah, I hope they point it in the right direction.
Yeah, point it east, guys. Point it east. That's my expert advice on this. I'm no architect, but point it east.
As for Bakersfield, if Stockton can spend big money to build a beautiful new ballpark for their Class A team, come on, Bakersfield, you got to be kidding.
Yeah. Although, did you hear that? I'm getting way off topic. You guys got to stop me on this. Just cut in. Stockton, that ballpark was originally supposed to be 2 stories before the city went bankrupt. And so they just dropped the upper story onto the first floor and wiped out about, I think, 700 or 800 seats in the process.
Yeah, that's all right. It's still a nice ballpark from what I hear.
It is really nice. That's Banner Island up there. That's a good one.
All right, Dan, let's head into the NBA playoffs. We got the series set. What a crazy last night of the playoffs, Dan. We had 44 possible different combinations going into the night of teams trying to win, teams trying not to win, figure out where they're going to go. And so now they're set. Obviously, we'll go real quick through some of these series, and then at the end I'm going to find out where your sleepers are at. We got the heavy-priced one, the Rockets and the T-Wolves. Minnesota had to go to the final game of the season, had to get overtime at home to even make the playoffs. In the price shows that this is going to be a quick series. Minus 6,000 we're seeing at Westgate on the Rockets. The question we have here, is this a 4-game series or a 5-game series?
Probably. Well, you know what? I'll go 5. I'll give the Wolves 1 game where Jimmy Butler does something special, or Karl Anthony Towns. That team is just so undisciplined. I couldn't believe that they beat the Nuggets, but that was the Jimmy Butler effect. They got no prayer in this series. It's a good draw for Houston. The Rockets' postseason doesn't really start until the second round.
The one quick question for you on Houston. Obviously we knew this team was going to be great offensively. Were you surprised at how well they actually played defense this year? That's what surprised me about the Rockets.
Yeah, I was, actually. And you know what? They made some shrewd moves that maybe went a little bit under the radar. Everybody paid attention to the Chris Paul deal, which, of course, was a big deal. But bringing in guys like PJ Tucker and Luc Mbah a Moute to sort of round out the Trevor Ariza contingent. It's kind of 3 guys that all do the exact same thing on that club. And it's toughness. It's this whole 3-and-D phenomenon in the NBA. And the Rockets realized that they needed to get a little more gritty. And on top of everything else, they had pretty good health from Clint Capella. That's a big deal for them this year. I believe he broke a bone in his hand last season. I might be getting the part of his body wrong, but he missed about 2 months. And he is a huge piece in everything they do. He is their rim protection. He is their pick-and-roll guy who actually rolls. Everybody else just sits at the three-point line. That team is very different when Capella is not on the floor. And so, having some health and having James Harden put together an MVP caliber year, you kind of roll that all together, and things worked out perfectly. And kudos to them for defending some people. They did what they had to do to get over the hump.
Dan, Ralph here. When I look at Houston now, I think that the additions they made, you compare them to Golden State when Golden State started off a few years ago, it almost is like adding the Draymond Green and Iguodala effect to the Rockets. Where do you put the Rockets compared to where Golden State was a few years ago?
I still think the Warriors have that slight edge in terms of the Warriors of, say, 3 years back versus the Rockets right now. And it might just be because the Warriors, even then, without Kevin Durant, did still kind of have a big 3, and the Rockets are really more of a big 2, and they're 2 very similar, not in style necessarily, but it's backcourt guys, where, Golden State had 2 of the best shooters in the league to go along with just this unbelievable, versatile, big man-style defender. So I think I'd give the Warriors just a slight edge in that side, but man, the Rockets are a lot closer than I think we all realized on opening night.
Speaking of the Warriors, they will take on the Spurs. The Spurs without Kawhi Leonard, do they have any chance in this one? And the Warriors, they're not going to have Curry for the first round. We're not sure exactly when he'll be back, but they should move on against the Spurs. Or do you give the Spurs any shot in here?
Not really, no. Spurs are old and slow, and the playoffs are helpful for them because you get days off in between games, but the LaMarcus Aldridge one-man gang thing is frankly, fundamentally sound defense, which is kind of how the Spurs got through the year. I kind of equated San Antonio this season to a baseball team that doesn't really have any star power, but also doesn't make any errors on defense. They're just going to win some games because they're not doing anything stupid. That doesn't really work in the postseason. You need to have guys that can create their own shot, and the Warriors have plenty of players they can throw at Aldridge that are going to give him a tough time. Hell, they could throw Zaza Pachulia directly underneath LaMarcus Aldridge, and everything would come apart. But I jest. The Warriors have to be thrilled with their draw. Not only San Antonio, but the 2 seed looks to me like the easiest path to the conference finals because they get the winner of Blazers Pelicans in round 2, and they dodge these lightning in a bottle teams like Houston, like the Jazz, like the Thunder until potentially the 3rd round. The Warriors this is exactly what they need, given how snakebit they kind of were this season with injury stuff. This is the perfect scenario for them.
Let's go to that Blazers series. You got the Blazers and the Pelicans in Portland. Big game, final game of the season. They nailed down the 3 seed, beating Utah at home. Utah was in a tough spot. They had played the night before against Golden State, although they had such a big lead because Golden State didn't care about that game that the starters only played 28 minutes in that game, each of them, 28 or less, I should say. So they can't blame fatigue, but this Portland team, they struggled a little bit down the stretch, but they played a lot of road games down the stretch. And I think a lot of people, looked at that and missed that as far as overreacting to Portland not playing well. And then you've got the Pelicans that almost got better when Boogie Cousins.
Not almost.
Yeah,
they did get better.
It's amazing. You lose a guy, a guy that's supposed to be a star, but, what do you make of it, and how far can this team go?
Well, it's not fair to call it necessarily addition by subtraction, but it was just sort of, they poured too much of their nectar into one cup. It's just a weird thing, and I can understand where they were coming from on the Pelican side. You want to do something a little different, because if you're going to go small ball, you're just not going to jump the Rockets and the Warriors. They're just going to be better than you at that particular type of basketball. So kudos, in my opinion, to the Pelicans for just trying something different. And then an even bigger set of kudos has to go to Anthony Davis, who cranked his game up to unreal levels when Boogie went down. And Drew Holiday, who put together quietly just a fantastic season, especially on the defensive side of the ball. But I actually think that the star power in New Orleans, the Anthony Davis story, they made it to a 6 seed without Boogie, they had to win games down the stretch. I actually think that may have created a tiny bit of value on the Portland side. And Marco, you brought up their kind of slow finish to the year with road games. Let's also not forget that Damian Lillard hurt himself with about 5 or 6 games to go and basically just played through it to make sure they got the 3 seed. So they were far from 100% healthy and had a rough schedule. Portland, like Houston, better on the defensive side than people realize, and Yusuf Nurkic actually looks like he knows what he's doing again. He's kind of turned himself into like Mr. March these days. I think the Blazers, who are not a massive favorite, are actually not a terrible value as a kind of short favorite in this series. I think they take care of business. Home court's a big deal for Portland. I like them in this one.
Dan Ralph again. Late in the year when Portland basically played a playoff game at OKC, and then they played the next game in New Orleans, which was, again, another playoff game. I think they trailed the entire game, finished with a 2-point win. How much stock do you give a team that was in a must-win game on the road, pulled the win out, and then a week or week and a half later, now playing them in the playoffs when they travel back there game 3?
I'm not too concerned. I kind of want to see how early games in this series go before kind of reacting to what may happen down the line. I think that Portland in my estimation, is better than people realize. And that, to me, is what it comes down to. I think the ability to win close games because they have a shot maker in Damian Lillard, because they finally have someone who can do something on the interior. And I've never been convinced that the Pelicans can actually stop anybody, which feels weird because Holiday and AD, both really good individual defenders, their team defense is atrocious, and they just try to run up the score. It's kind of an Alvin Gentry thing to do. I don't know that that's going to work in the playoffs. I mean, Portland could go into New Orleans and win there in Game 3 anyway. Maybe they're just comfortable there now. So I don't know that you can put a whole lot into, like a revenge angle on that, or however you may want to look at it on either side. I'd look at the first two games of this series, and you may see a New Orleans team that either surprises us and comes out and plays better on the defensive side than people expect, or is what I've seen during this season, and that's a team that relies on a couple of transcendent offensive talents to kind of carry them when the other stuff isn't working right.
Portland is minus 220 series price on that one. Finishing off the West.
Can I just jump in? Is this, to me, Portland minus 220 doesn't interest me. But if New Orleans wins Game 1, at that point, you're going to get a pretty big adjustment. And that might be the time I'd take a shot with Portland. Dan,
I love that idea.
You think that's a good strategy? Sometimes patience is a real virtue.
Yeah, I love that idea. You create kind of a nice meaty core that you can bite into that way, where, maybe somebody gets that first home game. You often see those teams get caught with their pants down. I was waiting to talk about pants dropping until the Raptors-Wizards series, but I guess you can throw it in here.
No problem. Finishing off the West, the Jazz, we had just talked about it in a previous segment, Dan. To me, other than Denver, not making the playoffs, the Jazz falling to the 5 seed, the biggest loser from the final night of the playoffs. They were one game away from a 3 seed and hosting a playoff series to now they got to go on the road. But for them, I think it's the best type of matchup. You've got defense versus offense, and we know Oklahoma City, they're not going to bring a defense with them. How do you see this series?
Oh, man, this one is going to be such a grudge match. I don't feel particularly strongly on either side of the betting action, which I realize is sort of a bad take to have on a betting podcast. But I can't wait to watch it. Russell Westbrook, after this, I'm not going to get into too much on the whole, him taking everybody else's rebounds thing, but he's basically playing to try to shake this weird nobody wants to play with me legacy. Does a strong playoff push kind of remedy that? Because KD wanted out, Oladipo wanted out, and how good did Victor Oladipo look when he got out from the Russell Westbrook cloud? Paul George, is he going to be a Laker next year? Does this series have anything to do with it? There's so many subplots in this. The Jazz and Donovan Mitchell, who's probably not going to win Rookie of the Year, but is just incredible. Rudy Gobert, who missed half the season, and then when he came back, Utah turned into an 80% winning clip team. This is going to be a great series. It's probably going to go 7 games. I feel like you're better served maybe picking individual games to bet on as opposed to the series.
That was my strategy was that the longer the series goes, I think it more favors the very physical Utah Jazz. And my thoughts were wait until Game 3 and play the Jazz at home, regardless of what happens in the first 2 games. I think that's where their advantage is going to show.
Yeah, I like the individual game strategy as well. I'm curious to see if Utah can snag one in OKC. Of course, you got 2 of the best home crowd noise arenas going in this series as well. I just, it's tough to know. Will Paul George wake up? I think he's been shooting about 38% for a month and a half. Is Westbrook going to take 35 shots? Is Steven Adams going to be allowed to grab a defensive rebound? Can Carmelo make 2 buckets in a ball? I mean, there's I love everything about this series. It's the high drama first round series that I think everybody's been waiting for. But yeah, from a betting standpoint, I think you probably leave it alone early, and then you wait for your spot. You kind of pick your spot, and then you hammer it.
Going to the East, we'll start with the number 1 seed. You got Toronto. They are minus 700 over the Washington Wizards. The Wizards fell all the way down to the eighth seed. This is a team that, was riddled with injuries. They went a long stretch without John Wall. They played well, just like New Orleans did initially when Wall went out, and then they, excuse the pun, hit the wall and, came back to reality. But they got Wall back. How do you see this series? And, Washington's not your typical 8th seed if they're healthy.
Yeah, I know a guy who I think goes by the nickname the Big Cup, who once talked about something called an injured star theory. Does that sound familiar to you?
Yeah, that first, right at the beginning when they lose the star, you ride them. And you made some money with a couple of those this year as the stars went up.
That's straight out of the Marco playbook. I'd drop that credit on you wherever possible. We saw that from Washington. Everybody just sort of free and easy when John Wall went down, and then he came back, and he and Brad Beal go back to this hero ball thing, which actually does kind of work a little bit in the postseason when there is a lot of half-court stuff, and you need the guys that can go get their own bucket. I'm concerned about Toronto perpetually, but if they can get through, frankly, game one, then they might go all the way to the finals. But game one for the Raptors historically has been so awful. They have this thing hanging over them that I think we've all experienced sort of mental hurdles in our lives, and they're arguably the toughest to overcome, the mental stuff. And for Toronto, they always lose that game one. It almost seems like they'd rather just go on the road and take an L in somebody else's arena instead of taking one in Canada. I think the Wizards are an interesting value here to start things off as a massive underdog. And then I think, if heaven forbid, if Washington actually takes a game or two early in this series, then you probably want to look at the Raptors as they start to make that adjustment and the weird little early series monkey comes off their back. I didn't want to say caught with their pants down again, but game one stuff for Toronto, people kind of need to be ready for it. It's tough to get that out of your head.
It's hard to lay 700 in a series on a team that doesn't know how to win a playoff series.
And by the way, has, I think, the most pressure they've ever had on them because they're a number one seed now.
Yeah.
Yep.
All of those past failures will be compounded even more. All right, moving on to the number 2 seed in, the MASH unit.
Wait till next year.
The Boston Celtics. This was a team that was, built to challenge the Cavaliers this year, and injuries have derailed them. Do they have a chance to get through one round against Milwaukee? We know Milwaukee's got some talent. Obviously, the Greek Freak, one of the best players in the NBA, up and coming. And Milwaukee on the final night, let's call it what it is. They tanked.
Yeah, one other thing I want to throw in, though, Dan, I'll preface it. I think there's no question the Celtics are beat up, and they're probably not going to go a long way in the playoffs. But I think this is the coaching mismatch of the first round.
Oh,
absolutely. It's just a blowout on the Stevens side.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I love Boston in this series, and I'm a Laker fan, so it's hard for me to say that. Brad Stevens versus Joe Prunty? Joe Prunty, guys? Come on. Listen, Milwaukee is, and I think I used the word undisciplined for one of the Western Conference teams, but Milwaukee is the ultimate. It was the Timberwolves. Milwaukee is the ultimate in zero discipline in the playoffs. They do not play any kind of reasonable defense. I've seen some of their own team blogs refer to it affectionately as hair on fire defense, where guys are just running all over the place, chasing the ball. All 5 guys are chasing the ball at the same time, and so their opposition constantly has open looks. Boston is going to know how to deal with Milwaukee. We've seen the Heat. I think it was I was watching a bunch of Bucks Heat games this year for some reason. Miami did a fantastic job with Giannis, and I can almost guarantee that Boston's going to pull up those games, and they're going to study everything Miami did, and they're just going to emulate it. And they're going to take away Milwaukee's primary offensive option. And I think the Celtics are still a slight favorite in this series. That's probably why. It certainly isn't star power right now because Boston's being led by Al Horford and Terry Rozier, but their discipline, their defense, and their coach, I think Boston's a fantastic wager.
Yeah, they're minus 155 is the market.
My favorite play in the first round.
Yeah, they're definitely, overreacting to everything, and the public has jumped in on that. And if you heard me chuckle there, Dan, it wasn't at your analysis, but when you said hair on fire, and you haven't seen the three guys that are in the studio. There is no hair that could be lit on fire at all in this studio lineup.
It's fine. We'll just use a bottle of hairspray. We'll use that as like a flamethrower. We're good.
We're no problem. And let's talk about the team that excites me the most in the East, and that's the Philadelphia 76ers. They did the old-fashioned way, man. They went down the stretch. They won 14 in a row. They took on the big giant LeBron in the biggest game in 76ers in recent history, and we're talking recent is probably a decade at least for that game last Sunday, or Friday night, I'm sorry. The big shootout, 134-132, I think the score was. How far can this team go? And, they're catching a matchup. Miami slides into the 6th spot because Milwaukee does the flop on last night. Do you see this team moving on, and how far can they go?
So I think I'm a little bit more concerned about Philadelphia than most are. I feel like they've captured the hearts of a nation with the whole trust the process stuff, and obviously Joel Embiid is kind of a fan favorite, and Ben Simmons is probably going to be your Rookie of the Year. These guys, by the way, I don't get to go to that many basketball games, but I did attend the Lakers-Sixers game where Embiid just went totally buck wild. He's incredible. I don't know when he's going to get back on the court. It sounds like he's questionable for the first game of this series. They played really tight games with Miami all season long. I believe they split the season series 2-2. I think Miami won both of their home games. Philly won both of theirs. I don't believe any of them was decided by more than 8 points, and a couple were within 2 buckets. I think this is going to be a harder series than people realize for Philly. Miami is a very smart team. Spo is another guy that probably deserves a couple of feathers on the coaching side. Philly's got all these rainbows and stars all around them now. Their odds have gone crazy to advance from this series, to win the championship. People are talking about Philly like this is the year, but they have very little playoff experience, and they desperately need Joel Embiid healthy if they're going to go a long way. I know that they've got some weapons out there, and I know that they actually beat the Cavs without him. But he's got to be right. And, boy, this is a series where I actually look the other way. I kind of like Miami, at least in terms of value. I don't know that the Heat are going to be able to pull it off, but I don't think I'm laying the kind of chalk that you have to with the Sixers right now, simply because the odds could almost be no worse for them. This is the low point all season long, regardless of kind of what futures you're looking at. So call me crazy, but I think Miami's going to give them a tougher time than people think.
You talk about the undervalued of the Celtics right now. If there's a team that's overvalued going into the playoffs, it's going to be the 76ers, and they are at minus 550 for the series. You can get 400 on the buyback with Miami. Wrapping up the final one in the East, and our guy in studio, Ralph Michaels, big Cleveland Cavalier fan, so be careful whenever you talk about this defense of the Cavs. But I joked with him in the first segment, did they flip the light switch? It's playoff time. Is everything going to be all right with the Cavs now? And they take on the Pacers, who is a team that played well down the stretch. They won 7 of their last 9 games before the final game, where didn't mean anything, and they rested players, and they played 6 of those 9 games on the road to finish the season. So I'm kind of impressed with the way the Pacers finished up. We know the Cavaliers, it's playoff time, and LeBron's going to put his cape on. Are they going to roll to the Eastern Conference Finals?
So let me preface this by saying, if I had a vote, and I don't, because they don't give idiots votes in this type of stuff. But if I had a vote, I think I'd actually go Nate McMillan for Coach of the Year. I think Indiana, and I'd have to go back and look at the numbers, but I'm pretty sure that they beat their season win total by more than any other team in the NBA. I mean, they beat it by something like 14 or 15 wins. That's a huge deal. However, and it's a big however, these are the Cavaliers. This is still LeBron, and they did look significantly better when Kevin Love came back from his injury. He's a big piece of what they do. I know defensively he's a liability, but on offense he is part of the machine that makes them work. He's one of the floor spacers who can also open up a fast break. He throws great passes. He's a rebounder. He keeps Tristan Thompson off the floor, which is a net positive for Cleveland. There's your addition by subtraction guy, Tristan Thompson. Cleveland is probably going to win this series. I don't think I'm betting on either side because there's way too much chalk with the Cavs. But I don't, in my heart of hearts, believe that Indiana can actually get by Cleveland. So I don't think that I could take what's a pretty big number for the Pacers. This is one I'm leaving alone.
You know, being a Cavs fan, I watch a lot of Pacers games, and if you could give the MVP to someone who averages under 15 points per game, Darren Collison is the MVP of the league. I mean, he averages 12.5 points per game. He's number one in the league with a 5.3 to 1.2 assist-to-turnover ratio, and he hits 47% from 3 points. The problem now for the Pacers and Collison is that the new Cavs with George Hill, Rodney Hood, and Jeff Green can actually stop and defend them, where the Pacers took 3 of 4 the Cavs earlier this year. That lineup wasn't in place to stop him running the Pacers offense.
Yeah, and I don't frankly believe that the Pacers can figure out how to win in a less open environment. That was really one of their weapons this year, was forcing turnovers, getting out on the break. Collison, Oladipo, Thaddeus Young, all really terrific at getting into passing lanes. I think Thad Young was top 3 in the league in deflections. You know, this is one of those guys that you don't hear a ton about, but in the regular season, that's enormous. Teams that let their guard down for a couple of days, you grab 5 or 6 steals, turn that into 10 points, that's a win where it might have otherwise been a loss. That type of stuff is just not going to be as easy to do in a grinding playoff series against LeBron every night. He's going to start beating your guys up. I mean, you know, look at it from the defensive standpoint. Who the heck do you put on LeBron James? Bojan Bogdanovic? That doesn't feel like a good matchup to me.
All right. Well, we went through all of those series. Tell me who you got in the NBA Finals.
I am going to go with the Warriors out of the West. I know that everybody's got Houston fever right now. I like the draw for Golden State. I think it gives them time to get Steph Curry back, and he's their engine, man. When he's out, things fall apart. He's the guy that can shoot from 40 feet where you can't defend that team. I still think they find a way to get past the Rockets. Maybe they don't even have to. What if Houston has to deal with Russell Westbrook in the second round? These types of things make a difference. The Warriors get the Spurs. Assuming they advance, they get either Portland or New Orleans. Those are very winnable series. I think they could actually win either of those series even without Steph, but it sounds like he'd be back for round 2. And out east, I'm struggling with this one. I got to be honest with you guys. Yeah, I keep wanting to think that it's just going to be the Cavs because that's what it always is. But I'm going to go crazy and say this is the year Toronto overcomes their demons. It's a Hollywood story built in the Great White North. They're a better team this year. They finally, Dwayne Casey, God love him, finally embraced the modern NBA and let them run a little bit. I can't tell you first quarters that I hated watching more than Toronto Raptors first quarters the last 2 years. To watch such a good team just walk it up for 12 minutes to start a ball game and to run these absurd, slow, developing offensive sets that resulted in like a Jonas Valanciunas 12-foot hook shot. This year they're getting out. They're playing free and easy. I think they've got some confidence. I still think that there is going to be some value in a series where they're fighting with their demons, but I think ultimately they get over them, and I think they're going to go. Maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like there's something there, and I'd love to see the Raptors in the finals. Warriors repeat with a win over Toronto.
Lord help us if Toronto makes it. The over-under on Drake on TV will be about 500 for the championship series.
Yeah, but which team is he going to be? Which colors is he going to be sporting? Isn't he just a fan of whatever team has the best player?
Well, I can't argue there. Where these guys, you guys with all of the rap stars.
I don't know who. I thought you were talking about Oliver Drake
Marco,
from the
I don't know
Milwaukee
that you
Brewers.
could phrase that in a way that made you sound older.
Well, you know what? But at least
I'm
not the oldest guy on this panel.
That's for sure.
It's hard to believe, but I am not.
No, yeah, that's why I'm so
If it makes you feel
glad.
any better, I can't name a single Drake song, so I'm right there with you.
All right. Hey, Dan, thanks for coming on board. Maybe we'll get you back for round 2 after we clear the dust of the opening round and see where things shake out. Check you out, all your work out at hoopball.com. Tell Aaron we said hi, and again, good doing a podcast with you again. We went full cycle here.
It's been way too long, Marco. I've missed your pretty face.
Yeah. Well, I'm not the baby-faced assassin, so you are that. And one of these times we'll do it. We'll do another show, and we'll tell some stories from the old days.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about. Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it.
All right, Dan.
See you, Dan.
Take care. All right, guys, that wraps up that segment. We're heading into the home stretch. You know what that means. One segment left. It's the best bets. It's what you wait for. 3-0 last week. Putting the pressure on the guys to deliver again. We'll be back in a moment with the best bets. Welcome back to the WagerTalk Podcast. This is the final segment, Best Bets. 3-0 last week. Let's see if we can do it again. Let's start with Dave. We're going to go. You've got an NBA play, but you're going a series play. Who are you going with, my man?
We talked about this briefly in the last series. And look, I think coaching makes a big difference at this time of year. And I think the Celtics have a big advantage in the coaching department against the Milwaukee Bucks. The price is not prohibitive because of the Celtics' injuries. I think they find a way to win 4 games this series, or however many they need to win the series. And then I'm going to take the Celtics at it. What to me is a bargain. I know they've got a ton of injuries.
Minus 155. You got a number 2 seed at minus 155.
Yeah, and I don't think they're a true number 2 seed right now, but I don't have much regard for the Bucks, to be honest with you. They're one-trick pony. I mean, they've got one great player, not a lot else, and a rookie coach who's an interim, so to speak. I mean, he replaced Jason Kidd in the middle of the season. Stevens, the way to go here, Celtics minus 155 to win the series.
Ralph, you've got a baseball play on Sunday. Tell us about it.
You know what? We ended the baseball broadcast talking about Beede and Lucchesi. They have 4 career starts. My game on Sunday, the pitchers have a combined 917 career starts. They do, honest to God. That's a real number. It's Texas and Houston, and, Verlander, 8 starts for Houston. He's 7-0 over the 2 years, a 1.2 ERA, the way they're hitting. Cologne started 1 game earlier this year, April 2nd, 6 innings pitched, 7 hits. He's pitched out of the bullpen the last couple weeks, came in when they were behind, just mop-up role. He's going to be back in a situation. Verlander's going to be a huge favorite, but my best bet is on the run line. Verlander, if he's about 280, you should be lay the run and a half and get about 130 in that game. The way they're hitting, the way he's pitching, put it together. Sunday, Verlander, Houston on the run line.
Yeah, and you coming up with that stat on the combined starts and
Wow.
Making the reference to the combined starts of the game that we – again, another shot at me picking San Francisco and San Diego for one of the preview games.
Bartolo is the oldest player in Major League Baseball. He is now 44 years old. He's a couple weeks older than Ichiro. So, yeah.
Yeah, and he's also the only baseball player that has the same physique as me.
You see the play he made a couple weeks ago, by the way, where it was a chopper that was well over his head, and Cologne leaped. I mean, the guy's still – he doesn't look the part, but he's a good athlete.
He is. I would not have made that play. I might have the same physique.
And I can guarantee you nobody in the studio would make the play.
Not even Mark?
No.
Okay.
It was a really good play by Cologne.
All right, guys, for my best bet, and let's head back to Boston. I am not going with a series play. I'm going to go to game 1, and we're getting a nice price. Boston -4 game 1. And you know what? Here's what I'm saying to the Milwaukee Bucks. Careful what you wish for. What a slap in the face. I'm sorry. If I am the Boston Celtics and Brad Stevens, we talked about all of his coaching how talented he is and what he gets the most out of his players and the discipline and everything else, you know what I do? I just go in and show them the box score of the final game of the season and show them what the Milwaukee Bucks did to slide into the 7 spot to face us. What disrespect that is to that team. And I think it is going to be a huge motivational edge for Boston. They're going to come out. They'll play that first game. We talk about the injured player theory and everything. Well, they've been without Irving for a long time. But this is the reset. This is the playoffs. This is like the first game without him, the playoffs. It's the second season. I think they have a monster game Sunday. I'll be on them. You're getting a good price right now. Jump on it. Lay the 4 points. That is my best bet for this week's show. That's a wrap, guys. I want to thank my co-host in studio, Ralph Michaels, Dave Cokin. Also want to thank the man behind the controls, Mark Seidel. He is what makes us sound so good. And, of course, our guest tonight, Dan Besbris. Great stuff from Dan. Look forward to having him on the show again in the future. And our man in Detroit, Motown, Johnny Detroit. He makes the podcast appear everywhere on social media. Don't forget, you can download our podcast, subscribe to iTunes, also hear us on iHeartRadio. And, guys, we got a special treat for you. $10 coupon. You listen to us, you deserve something. You spend an hour and a half with us. Let's give you $10 if you use coupon code PLAYOFFS and the number 10. That's PLAYOFFS and the number 10. Just use that at WagerTalk.com. Put it in the checkout, and you can get $10 off any package this week. Dave, you've been hot in baseball. Looking forward to what you've got going this weekend. Ralph, NBA playoffs, NBA stat sheet will be back in action, and first pitch is starting, so you'll have daily information with baseball. All that stuff is free at WagerTalk. Check myself, Marco D'Angelo, off to a great start in baseball. Looking forward to the playoffs. We'll be back in a week. Guys, good luck this weekend, and let's cash some tickets.
And I bid you good night. Good night. Good night.
I'll catch you on the flip side.